morning, Anne-Marie Cross here again, Podcasting Queen, here with another Facebook Live all about podcasting. So if you have been thinking about different ways of marketing yourself, a podcast is a really great way because, it allows you to deepen the engagement with your audience because of the fact that a podcast show can often be longer. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be talking about today. How long should a podcast be? How long should the show be? How often should you be posting? And then another question that I was asked recently when I was presenting my talk about podcasting and how you can stand out, be heard, and become an influential voice. Over the weekend, I gave that talk, and one of the comments from one of the participants was, how do I come up with lots of different content, show after show after show? I'm going to run out of ideas. So I'll share a few other tips around that as well. Before I do dive into some of the topics, I'm going to just share a link here on the screen. This is for those of you who want to dive in further to various trainings around podcasting. I've created a mini training. You can access it there from annemariecross.com/mini training. And that allows you to cover things such as things that are going on in the marketplace, statistics, case studies where people have really used and leveraged podcasting to build awareness in their business, as well as things that you need to consider if you're deciding that you want to launch your own podcast as well. Right. So the first thing I'm going to want to talk about is how often you should be publishing your podcast. Now, I've been podcasting since 2008, and over that time have had many different podcasts, my own podcasts that I've co-hosted, and even now that I'm hosting and producing for clients. And they range from weekly format, so week by week by week, through to a bi-weekly. So we know that is fortnightly here in Australia, so that's every second week. And I even got a podcast with a client that we're partnering with, who we are doing that on a monthly basis. So I have done weekly, I've done bi-weekly and monthly. But what you need to consider is not just how often you should be doing this, your time frame, but actually looking at your overall marketing and overall strategy and the reason why. That's why I call my mini training and my upcoming course that's launching at the end of June, Podcasting with Purpose. There has to be purpose to the decisions that you're making, and that goes as well with frequency. So just to give you a bit of insight as to the reason why I decided to publish monthly with one particular client, there was real purpose and intention. And that is because we were publishing a show monthly with a guest. So we co-hosted and interviewed a guest. Then what we were going to do throughout the other time was to share that, have communications with this particular co-host's network, have a Facebook Live as well. So there was other pieces of content and interaction and engagement with his audience, and not just a monthly podcast, because you can understand that if someone's only hearing from you and hearing content on a monthly basis, just once a month, that's not really a long time span, is it? It's not frequent enough to really build that engagement. So you need to be thinking, what else can I do around that that'll enable me to enhance it, leverage it, that particular content, so that my audience does have more interactions with me. Fortnightly, so bi-weekly, every second week, is a really good time frame, I think, if you don't want to do a weekly one, but you still want to show up, you still want to provide value, because remember, it's all about providing value to your audience as you are building know, like, and trust. So these are the things that you need to consider. I do a lot of weekly podcasts, and the reason is here too, and this kind of will tie into how do you come up with a lot of content ideas. I'm not the one that's having to think of ideas in content, because a lot of my shows, I'm the host and I'm interviewing guests. So remember, there's purpose behind that too. What sort of guests, what sort of topics, is it going to fit into the theme, all that kind of thing. So when you hear me say I do a weekly one, it's kind of, that's a lot of content. Well, there is a time frame, that is a commitment for sure. But because I'm not coming up, I'm interviewing, I don't have to sit there brainstorming to think of lots of ideas. So again, you need to think about what purpose is this podcast going to play within your marketing? What can you leverage alongside what you're doing already, and how can that fit in? So that's what I would ask. But one thing that you need to be mindful of, if you decide on a time frame, whether it be weekly, fortnightly, bi-weekly or monthly, you need to be consistent. That's what I say to people, because just like if we have a favourite TV show that runs on a week-by-week basis, if all of a sudden the producers say, no, you know what, we couldn't be bothered sharing or recording anything this week, it's going to be quite difficult for you to maintain your interest, and that's a quick way to lose your audience. So really decide what's going to fit in, how's it going to leverage and harness what you're doing in your marketing already, and make the decision that way. So I hope that was helpful. Okay, so how long should a show be? Again, how long is a piece of string? Let me just share some things that I've learned over the 9 years, and also the feedback that I'm getting from listeners, new listeners, and also various other podcasters. They've written articles over the years as well. My shows and the shows that I host for my clients are typically around 20 minutes to 30 minutes in length. Some of them might go over a little bit over, 35 minutes or so, but generally I stick within the 20 to 30 minutes being the max. There's a reason for that, and that is a while ago I read an article where people were being surveyed and asked, what is your favourite time to listen to a podcast, or the length? And many people were commuting at that time, or they were, whether it would be on a train on the way to work, or whether it would be in the car driving. And they said 20 to 30 minutes is a good time frame, because it's often that's how long it will take, unless, of course, you're on the Monash here in Victoria. It could take you an hour to get to work, depending on traffic. But 20 to 30 minutes was a good time frame, because it allowed you to dive in deep enough to a particular topic to give real value, rather than, say, a 10 or, kind of a 10-minute topic, or even 15, that kind of allowed you to provide information on the surface. Again, it depends. What purpose is this particular podcast? Do you want to just come in there with a quick tip, and then maybe the call to action is signing up or getting access to a longer show where someone can spend a bit more time and you can dive deeper into the various topics? Again, it all has to be asked that question, what is the purpose? So 20 to 30 minutes. I have had shows where hosts have spoken for about 50 minutes, 60 minutes. For me, if I'm looking at a show and it's about 50 minutes or longer, or even 40 minutes and longer, I kind of then question, do I really have time to listen to this? Now, if I'm driving or commuting and there is some distance that I have to travel, it doesn't matter. But it was interesting, because I just spoke to a colleague of mine recently, and he's a videographer. And he's a new listener, so a new consumer of podcasts. He's only been listening for the last number of months. And he says that his particular time frame that he loves to listen to is 40 minutes. And there's a reason why. He said, because I love to mow the lawn and listen to podcasts. He doesn't love to mow the lawn, but he loves to listen to podcasts when he's mowing the lawn. And he says, I love to soak in the bath. So 40 minutes is a really good time for me to listen while I'm doing either of those activities, because it really allows me to dive in deep, listen to what the co-hosts are sharing. His favourite show is a videographer show. So he's learning, he's keeping his finger on the pulse. So really, again, you can see in that response, or in the answer, it's going to be very dependent on the purpose, the reason why you're creating that piece of content, and also to gauging the interest and feedback from your audience. Typically, what do they like? What kind of length of show do they prefer? You imagine if your ideal client was busy executives, CEOs, or professionals who are time poor. They're very, very busy. What you may then decide to do is chunk it down, give them some really solid content, maybe around the 20-minute mark, so that they can listen, run, and then continue on with what they are doing. But they're still engaging with you. You're still being able to share your particular wisdom. So again, gauge your audience and to see what they prefer. And maybe change it up a little bit as well. Some of the shorter podcast lengths, such as 1 or 2 minutes long, maybe even 5 minutes, they're probably more a tip and not what I would base your overall podcast strategy. If that's something that you really wanted to create a podcast to build awareness, become an influential voice in your field, doing that in a very shorter time frame, I would not imagine would be good. Unless, of course, and this leads me to my next, unless, of course, you do this. How do I come up with ideas and content for the show? As I said earlier, I tend to interview a lot of guests. There's things that you need to consider. Again, podcasting with purpose. You need to be purposeful in the type of guests that you select. Are they following and providing similar topics as you? Do they have similar values as you do? Are they integral in their dealings? One of the guests that approached one of my shows that I co-hosted, I did a little bit of research, and you always should do a bit of research just to check to see that what they are providing and the information that they're sharing is valid, is honest. Anyway, when we did a Google search on this particular person, up came 3 different links. And I think on the second link, there was an article that had been written about this person that mentioned fraudulent dealings. Now, would I want to invite someone on my show who had an article there that showed up on the second search on Google about fraudulent business dealings? Well, absolutely not. So we kindly just said, thank you so much. However, at this stage, our calendar is full. Anyway, so make sure if you decide that your content is going to be also including you hosting and interviewing guests, that your guests are aligned with your values and the content is relevant as well. If you are sharing your own content, what you may want to do is mix it up a little bit. So in other words, your shows that you interview other people may be around the 20 to 30 minutes. But if you want to share a bit of content, maybe what you do then is keep that to 10 or 15 minutes. So you interchange it a little bit. Remember, there is no set rules that are put on. The only rules that are set are the rules that you determine for yourself, which again are determined and decided on because of the purpose, because of the intention and what you hope to do and what you plan to do with your podcast. So you can do that in a really good way as well. One of my shows that I did invite guests to, one of my colleagues actually said to me, why don't you do a show where you just bring the content? I said, I don't really know if anyone would be interested. She said, of course they would. So I published a show that would be 20 to 30 minutes, which was just me. And I think within 2 days, I had more downloads than I did for a whole month for an interview that I did with other guests. So what that showed me was that the people who were listening really valued what I had to share. So, again, play around with your formatting and the guests and what content that you bring so that you can then change the different aspects that you're bringing. So it can be you one week, you and a guest for a couple of weeks, and then maybe you the next show as well. I love brainstorming and mind mapping. So, for instance, some of the topics that I love to speak about is around branding, helping people identify their signature brand, as well as this. And then from that, there could be identifying your signature brand voice, your message, your stand for, your influential, disruptive voice. So you can see if you were mind mapping, you start off in the middle. Let me see if I can draw something here. When you start off with a mind map here, and it might be branding, and I know this is going to come off weird. I don't know if you can see it there. Does it come out? Can you see it there? Branding there. And then an offshoot from there could be your brand message. And then from there it could be disruptive voice. This is what I normally do when I'm kind of brainstorming some ideas. I don't know. Okay, yep, you can see it. Fantastic. So you can see that there is the topic of branding. And then from that topic, I can brainstorm lots of different ideas. What about it? So brand brand message. I can talk about a brand message. Then I can talk about, okay, so how can that brand message become a disruptive voice in the industry? And then you can see I can just narrow down and do all of these different spokes out of just branding. So I could come up with, say, 20 different unique ideas that all center around branding, things that I want to bring to the table, things that are quite unique in how I share topics around that. So you can use that same principle as well. So draw some mind maps, and then from there branch off and then really break it down, chunk down that main idea into various different ideas. Each of those can become either a show on its own, or it could become a show, one particular show, where you break down each of the different topics. For instance, I could talk about a show on how to identify your signature brand. So I'll be talking about, how to define your brand message, how to take that message even further and become a disruptive voice in your industry, and 3 ways in which you can then share your message out into the world with different platforms. That would make a really nice show.